In celebration of the Economic and Financial Literacy Week, the National Economic and Development Authority brings you this special session titled AmBisyon Natin 2040 in the New Normal. I'm Nerissa Esguerra from the NEDA Development Information Staff, one of your hosts today. In this session, we will explore and discuss challenges, opportunities, and strategies that will inform the next Philippine Development Plan. We have invited two former socioeconomic planning secretaries, a working mother with school-age kids, and a young economist. So to discuss how the pandemic affected the government's efforts towards attaining the collective aspirations of the Filipino people, and to share the proposed reforms in the updated Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, may I call on Undersecretary Rosemary G. Edilion from the NEDA Policy and Planning Group. Yusek Rose?
Yes, thank you very much, Nerissa, and good afternoon to everyone, and of course our former bosses, si Secretary Chairman RC Balisacan and si Sec Manny Esguerra. It's really good to be reunited virtually, yeah, in the new normal. Yeah, so welcome to everyone who are in this virtual conference, and join us as we discuss about this ambisyon natin in the new 2040. So I'll be sharing my screen. Okay. So I'd like to confirm lang if you can see my screen. Thumbs up? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So first of all, we do this every year actually, and it's really by virtue of Republic Act 1092, which is an act declaring the second week of November of every year as Economic and Financial Literacy Week. And the ones who legislated this, the wisdom of the legislators at the time is that economic and financial literacy are actually important, and it's what we need in order to accelerate our transition to being in an upper middle income country, and then later on an upper income country. So, but at this time, we actually cannot escape the fact that we are in a pandemic. COVID-19 is upon us, has been upon us since last year. But for this afternoon, we'd like to focus on what we have learned so far and how can we make these learnings. What are the lessons that we need to bring forward, as if we still want to achieve this ambition going into the 2040. So some learnings on financial literacy, we have seen the importance of having savings, both in terms of money and food. That it should always be the case that at any point in time you should really have something in stock in your pantry. Just as long as you have to wait until government is able to give you that ayuda. At least you have something to get by. There's also that very, very important lesson of practicing restraint in spending. So during this time, we were able to prioritize. We had to prioritize our spending. Really, just focus first on the essentials before we could spend on the what we call the non-essentials. So now we actually had that dichotomy between the essentials and the non-essentials. In terms of economic literacy, there are so many lessons, but I'd like to focus on two things. One is this reality of there having economic interrelationships, and also the reality that there has to be this sequencing of economic policies and programs. We cannot, it will not be wise to undertake all at the same time, even as we want to be able to recover from this pandemic. So for instance, these are the activities that were, or the sectors that were really adversely impacted by this COVID-19 and of course the lockdowns. We have transport and tourism. We have exports, remittances, consumption, and other social activities. But what we want to focus on is the reality of this economic, the linkages between sectors, across sectors, and even across geographical space. So, for instance, even if the mobility restrictions were confined only in the NCR, we see how tourism has not yet picked up in other places of the country, so that even the resort owners of Batangas had really to request that NCR residents be allowed to travel to Batangas, because as it turns out, more than two-thirds of their clientele is actually coming from NCR. So how we have seen that when we restricted restaurants, capacity in restaurants, operations of dine-in restaurants, so even the demand for what we call some of those the fast foods, of course, and by extension even the demand for poultry, for suddenly we have an oversupply of this of these products, because the demand is not there. It's not as big as before. So that's one lesson that we have. Another lesson that we have seen here is the importance of sequencing of economic policies, even as we also do risk management of all these economic strategies. So I have here the equations for the demand and supply for GDP, actually coming from the demand side and the supply side. And uh, so what usually happens is, you have demand. If there's a growth in demand, then it induces more production, and that increased production will actually increase the incomes of those working in this production sectors, and that will induce again more demand, and so you have that virtuous cycle. However, in during these times of the pandemic, when we restricted mobility, we restricted the operations of certain retail outlets, even the dine-in restaurants, and therefore this C is actually down. Consumption is down. Investments, since most of these investments really has to do with you put a stake on the future, and if the future is uncertain, therefore investments is also down. And then your X minus M, which is essentially the demand from the rest of the world, since this is a global pandemic, this one is also down. And so, uh, a key strategy in order to have economic recovery is really to increase government spending. So, as you increase government spending, so let's say distribution of food packs, which includes rice, sardines, noodles. So, so the increased demand for rice will actually induce, government will have to buy it from agriculture. It's an output of agriculture. It will have to be milled, of course. So again, that's an output of industry. Even the sardines, the fish will be an output of agriculture. It will have to be bottled, processed bottled. So that's again an output of industry. But then later on, it will have to be packed and then delivered, and that's an output of services. And therefore, you have the case where you have a revitalized demand coming from the counter-cyclical policy of government. And then this one will empower production capacities to capture that demand. And the hope is that with the increased income, then hopefully you increase also that consumption and also hopefully investments. And then again, you have that virtuous cycle. The problem though is that we are working with the threat of COVID-19. And this is foremost in the minds of consumers, in the minds of business owners. And therefore, even with the increased incomes brought about by, increased G, and then the increased AIS, even that will not really redound to increase C or I, because we're still restricting mobility, or people are still not confident to go out. Now, this threat, the perception of a threat of COVID-19 is really fueled by the reality of the COVID-19 infection. So all those data that is being reported every day. And therefore, even as we try to start this economic recovery, we need to recognize and emphasize the primacy of anti-COVID strategies. yes, we need to rebalance this health and economic strategies, economic objectives. And what we're saying is that there is that sweet spot where we can have we can actually, it's not really a matter of this or that, but it's really about there is a level where we can do both, where we can actually address this COVID-19 infection, address also that perception of risk of the COVID-19, and then also reopen the economy. So this is actually our general synthesis of what we think is the new normal. First, physical distancing will still be observed, strict hygiene and sanitation protocols, more outdoor than indoor activities. There could still be sporadic lockdowns, and then, of course, still the threat of COVID-19, foremost in the minds of individuals and businesses. And therefore, our big problem now is how do we help our kababayans for them to achieve their ambition. We are mindful, for instance, of the Human Capital Index, the toll of this COVID-19 and mobility restrictions on the human capital. First of all, on the nutrition, our nutrition outcomes. So this Human Capital Index actually measures the amount of human capital that a child born today could expect to have given the risk to poor health and poor education in the country. So we're looking at the probability that the child will survive up to age 5, the probability that he or she will be learning, will be gaining quality education, and then that he or she will actually be will survive up to adulthood. So our problem is that this COVID-19 and the mobility restrictions have negated some of our gains with respect to health and nutrition, and also with respect to education. But there could be some more. And we really need to bring the best minds here so that we can come up with the strategies that are needed in order to help our kababayans to enjoy this matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay even in the new normal. So how can we make sure that we can still have work and life balance even as you now actually integrate your workspace into your home space, into your living space? How can we make sure that we can still have a strong sense of community even as we do not, we have less of this gatherings now? How can we still make sure that they will be free from hunger and poverty with this, with the need to have these granular lockdowns or mobility restrictions? How can we enable them to have this travel and vacation opportunities when, so many we are restricting travel, so many resorts are still closed? How can we ensure that they will still be able to enjoy this long and healthy life amid these health risks, and also be able to look forward to a comfortable retirement, and of course most especially have enough resources for day-to-day needs and unexpected expenses when this unexpected situation is becoming more protracted? So there's so many questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our experts, from our advisors, and so looking forward to having a productive discussion with you. Thank you very much, Neris.
Thank you, Yusik Rose. That's a lot to think about. Ano? But before we start with the panel discussion, let me call on Director Reynaldo Cancio, my co-host for today. Ray? You're on mute, Ray.
Okay. Praise of the year. Yeah, good afternoon again to everyone. I'm Ray Cancio from the NEDA National Policy and Planning Staff. Excited to be here, just like everyone. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to the very substantive discussion.
All right, so we hope to have a lively discussion, and I'm sure we will have a lively discussion today. If you already have burning questions at this point and thoughts, you may send it to us and we will try to address them later during the open forum. So we'll now hear from our distinguished panelists, starting with the chairperson of the Philippine Competition Commission and former Socio-Economic Planning and NEDA Director General. It was during his term in NEDA when the long-term visioning exercise was initiated. So please welcome Dr. Arsenio M. Balisacan. Hi, sir.
Okay. Hello.
Hi, sir.
I'm very
So,
pleased. Yeah, go ahead.
all right, Ray.
Yes, Sir RC, Music Rose posed a number of questions during our presentation. I was wondering what your thoughts are on those points.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for that background information, Yusek Rose. I'm glad that there is quite some deep thinking going on into the whole revisit of the AmBisyon 2040 and the way forward. And I'm very pleased to see all of you here. I do miss NEDA, and I'm very pleased to be part of this exercise. Okay, let me start with the thought that that clearly, as pointed out by Rose, the COVID-19 pandemic have left us with deep economic scars, which put together erode the economy's potential for long-term growth and inclusive development. And that's how it gets into the AmBisyon 2040. And I'm specifically talking about the long period of unemployment leading to loss of skills, the loss of organizational and informational capital, especially by SMEs, and the loss of financial lifelines by these enterprises. And Rose mentioned the lost years of schooling and the hunger and the permanent disability that has impaired human capital. Again, that will impact on long-term productivity. There is also the investment forgone due to heightened uncertainty and indebtedness. I think the indebtedness is going to, as our experience suggests, going to have quite a long-term impact on many companies. And lastly, I think that we should all be mindful that the rising inequality. I think that what has been seen in data that have come out across many countries is and we are not exempted to that, is that the pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities and also created new ones. And so the relevance of that is obviously that it's likely going to be harder to lick poverty based on economic growth alone, because this inequality, rising inequality, is likely to have and will likely to reduce the response of poverty reduction to economic growth. And so you really have to do many other things to restore the quite impressive response of poverty to economic growth that we have seen in the last couple of years, as borne by the 2012 and 2015 and 2018 Family Income and Expenditure Survey. So then the most urgent thing for government then to at this point is to prevent further economic scarring and build the economy back better. And as Rose pointed out, the two sides of the chain, the health and the economy, would have to be addressed simultaneously, because one without the other is not likely going to lead to Ambition 2040, attainment of Ambition 2040. And specifically, we need to ramp up the testing, the tracing, the treatment, and vaccination. The testing must become accessible to the poor and results delivered quickly to enable treatment and isolation. I think there's so much still concern about the harmonization or the lack of it of tracing systems across LGUs and regions. And one wonders why we haven't put that in place yet. We need to also support and expand public hospital capabilities or capacities. It has become clear that while we have many buildings of hospitals, what's inside those hospitals are severely lacking, in terms of manpower, supplies, and others. And again, not only in the Philippines, but we seem to be seeing inequities in access to vaccines, as well as testing, tracing, and treatment. And that's become very apparent when you contrast Metro Manila and the rest of the region, for example. And then there's this issue of incentives for our medical professionals. Whether we like it or not, we have to stop or at least enhance those incentives so that we don't continue to see loss of this very essential human capital in the Philippines, because with the pandemic, surely the demand for our professionals outside the country has increased so much. And if we and as we invest into developing more nurses and doctors, we simply will lose them. And so that's a very important and urgent, I think, attention to be given to. Okay, then the second part is still on this health issues and the social side of the cycle is that Rose showed is that we need to safely reopen schools, especially in rural areas where the virus is contained, thereby preventing further losses of productivity and future earnings. It's a challenge, but many of the countries in our regions have learned so quickly to how to get the things done, and I think we need to do the same. And as I said earlier, there is this big issue about increasing inequality, and a big part of that is coming from this digital divide. That there is obviously the access to schools, access to health, access to employment, access to almost everything now depends so much on access to the internet, access to good quality telecom facilities. So I think we need to think about, say, for example, providing targeted internet allowance to expand access to online schooling. And from the point of view of PCC, of course, we are challenged to vigorously enforce the Philippine Competition Act against exclusive dealings or exclusivity dealings and other anti-competitive arrangements, such as, for example, between real estate developers and internet service providers, so as to reduce cost of access and improve service quality. I think that there's a lot of challenge for retraining and reallocating programs toward e-commerce and digital platform services. I would like to see Dole facing that. And then finally, I would like to see that while we have so much now, we are much constrained by the fiscal space given the ballooning of the death. I would like to see that that we can maximize the benefits of government's economic assistance, and we need to ramp up and increase this assistance. But we can maximize these benefits for the target groups by ensuring these are well targeted, these are transparent, fair, efficiently administered, and time bound. And I think that if we can ramp up the national ID system, for example, we can facilitate better targeting. We should consider grants to MMAs, even targeted wage subsidies in high contact sectors. Obviously, this will cost a lot of money, and that's going to will require a lot of designing attention. So I'll stop there. I focus initially on the immediate emerging issues, and if we have time later, I can also go into the longer term issues of building back the economy better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. This was a lot to take in. I want to ask you actually about also how you see this pandemic, affecting the future of Asia. I remember when you started this visioning exercise, you called a number of officials, media officials, into the executive lounge and showed us this video of the Asia 2050 report of ADB. That's what really started the ball rolling. But I'll get back to you on that. Maybe I'll just turn now for now to another former boss of ours. He was the secretary at the time that we concluded the long-term visioning exercise. He's recently retired from the UP School of Economics. Talking about, of course, Dr. Manny Esguerra. Sir Manny?
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, perhaps you'd like to react to what the questions posed by Rose, or some of the thoughts mentioned by Sir RC, especially with respect to issues on the scarring effects, particularly in the labor market.
My remarks will be, well, I'm glad that RC touched on the urgent concerns and the specific measures that or that to address the effects of COVID. My remarks are more in the nature of, shall we say, some reflections on the longer term or the fundamental issues that AmBisyon Natin 2040 advance. So I recall that when AmBisyon was being formulated back in 2015, we had acknowledged the fact that people's priorities and preferences change over time, and that unexpected developments may arise, whether that's in the natural environment, for example, due to climate or disease outbreak, or in science and technology that may necessitate a reassessment of goals and aspirations. And certainly COVID has disrupted whatever progress has been made toward realizing a matatag, maginhawa, panatag na buhay para sa lahat. Much has been said about the huge toll that the pandemic has exacted on our people's physical, mental, emotional, and financial well-being. And there is no need to repeat them here. Still, it should be emphasized that the burden of adjusting to the effects of the pandemic has been disproportionately heavier on certain sections of our population than on others. The pandemic has laid bare the weaknesses in our healthcare and social protection systems in terms of the speed and adequacy of the response to those most adversely affected by the lockdown. It has also exposed the vulnerabilities of our supply chains for food and other essential non-food items to contingencies such as public health emergencies. It will be good, therefore, to see more specific strategies and plans on how to overcome these weaknesses in the updated PDP. In particular, a social protection spending is bound to become more important going forward. Investing in strengthening the country's social protection system, including through the institution of a social protection floor, only seems reasonable. At the same time, I think it should be recognized that cumulative gains in economic performance over the last decade have resulted in a socio-economic structure that is much different today. The recent Philippine Human Development Report 2020-2021 notes that, and I quote, by 2015, a broadly defined middle class constituted a larger share of all families than those classified as broadly poor. Right? So in AmBisyon Natin 2040, we were talking about middle class aspirations and Philippine society reaching middle class status by 2040. Well, the process, in fact, had begun much earlier, and by 2015, as the Philippines, the Philippine middle class had the growth of the Philippine middle class had outpaced that of the poor, although only slightly. More specifically, between 1997 and 2015, the share of the poor declined from 40% of all families to 33%. And over the same period, the share of the middle class rose from 32 to 36%, even as the proportion of the vulnerable increased from 28% to 31%. To be sure, these proportions have been affected by the pandemic, and many among the vulnerable, and possibly even some among the middle class, may have experienced a deterioration in their condition, probably returning to the state of poverty for some. But the pandemic, can only interrupt what appears to be a process already underway. And that is bound to continue with the resumption of growth as restrictions on economic activity are further loosened. It is important to point out the social differentiation that has occurred so that government policies, plans, and programs are better able to respond to the specific concerns of households while avoiding the usual one-size-fits-all type of solutions, which is neither efficient nor equitable. To quote once more from the Philippine Human Development Report, increasing heterogeneity means households confront different obstacles and opportunities that lead them to different welfare trajectories through time. A clear example of how this was ignored can be seen in how our decision makers chose to finance tertiary education. Republic Act 10687, or the Unified Student Financial Assistance System for Tertiary Education, or UNIFAST, the UNIFAST Act, provides for a comprehensive and unified student financial assistance system for tertiary education. And under this act, financial support is tailored to the specific needs of the recipients. Thus, scholarships which are merit and talent-based are directed towards producing a pool of highly qualified graduates and technical experts who will contribute to the high-level labor force. On the other hand, grants in aid are for students from marginalized sectors to facilitate their access to quality education, while student loans are to assist students with liquidity issues. So differentiated according to different needs. Unfortunately, this act was not funded. What was funded instead was RA 10931, providing for free tuition and other school fees in state universities and colleges, local universities and colleges, and state-run tech-voc institutes, which sons and daughters of the wealthy are also able to partake of. On a second point, and since the theme of the PES annual meeting is about harnessing digitalization, let me add my 2 cents worth to the conversation and relating this to AmBisyon, in particular, what is life, or more specifically, work likely to be going forward? Is work from home going to be the norm in the future? Will this become a regular feature rather than a contingency in offices and organizations? I think that independently of COVID-19, the future of office work has been a subject of debate. For instance, one study I came across mentions the dire traffic situation in the metropolis, which has provided the context for proposals about flexi time and work from home arrangements in the Philippines. However, these discussions are best seen as part of the bigger conversation about the future of work in many parts of the world. To be sure, the digital revolution is one reason for this, and COVID-19 has merely accelerated the adoption of digitalization in many work arrangements. Still, it is not a settled question whether remote work is good for productivity. We will need to wait for more evidence. In the past year, at least, the pandemic had loaded the arguments in favor of work from home. But with the lifting of restrictions, we should soon obtain a better picture of which jobs can be productively performed remotely and which are likely to be recalled to the office. The extent to which work from home setups will become a regular feature of work arrangements in the future depends upon the effect of such arrangements on workplace productivity, profitability, consumer preferences, consumer satisfaction, worker preferences, and the distribution of gains or losses therefrom between employers and employees. Work from home arrangements, if normalized, are bound to affect workers' concerns about work-life balance. Those mentioned this a while ago, as well as aspects of human resource management in the firm, such as recruitment, work monitoring, and evaluation, and the system of incentives and rewards. It will also affect the way workers as a collective unit deal with employers, a situation that is already made difficult by the practice of non-standard or non-regular employment. It is therefore bound to cast the spotlight on existing labor laws, as it already has in relation to the gig economy, especially on the question of who is an employee and who deserves protection under labor laws. It will be instructive to obtain some indication of how Filipinos view life in the emerging normal relative to their aspirations of a matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay. So perhaps a new national survey? Let me end there.
All right. Thank you, Sir RC and Sir Manny. Those are a lot of ideas from our economists, of course. But let's now try to bring the discussion to the individual level, to real life situations. We'd like to hear from our youth sector and also from a working mom. We have two other panelists here. So we have here first Miss Patricia Marcela Evite. Tisha is the founder of eConcepto, a nonprofit organization aiming to make economics understandable for Filipinos to increase public participation and discourse that affects their livelihoods and future. So tama-tama ano. So para makarelate yung ating viewers sa Facebook, we're now live streamed on Facebook. So hi Tisha, I know you have an economics background, but can you please share with us your thoughts on how the pandemic has affected your quality of life as a young professional? How have you been coping? And maybe you can also discuss some feedback on what you've heard so far. Tisha?
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Nerissa. Excited to be here. I was actually part of the 2017 visioning exercise, so it's been it's been a while, and we're so excited to be here. So much so that eConcepto actually organized a small systems thinking exercise with our youth audience. So I'd like to maybe touch on key issues they thought that needs to be rethink. And maybe I'll touch on that first and answer how life has changed for youth, young professionals, working and students. So first, I building up on Dr. Balisacan's comment on inequality. The youth is also curious whether this approach is effective, given that the UN Conference on Trade and Development reports that even though the global economy is expected to grow by 4.7%, extreme poverty population is expected to increase by 228 million at the end of this year. So maraming na rin pong kabataang ekonomista ang nagda-doubt also on assumptions of these theories, especially those that revolve around self-interest. For example, na-observe ng youth na it's opposite on what happened during the pandemic. We see the rise of community pantries as a response to government and market failures in the provision of basic foods. And it served as a two-pronged solution, eliminating surplus and reallocating them to those who need it the most. So development scholars from the University of Sussex pose the question on whether these moments of solidarity na nakita natin sa pandemic, is it only applicable in emergencies, or is it a viable alternative economic system for post-COVID? So the question of the youth now is, how can we sustainably incorporate bayanihan in our economic transactions? And the second issue I'd like to bring to the table is the youth's perspective on environment. I agree with Yusek that the important learning is interrelationships. In fact, the origin of COVID-19 is brought upon by our interaction with the environment for an economic transaction. So economic actors, buyers, and consumers in the market, we need to think how our economic footprint affects our limited natural resources. Noong mga unang panahon po ng lockdown, we observed that pwede pala maging maliwanag yung skyline ng Manila. No? Ang nakakalungkot po is that it is because of the absence of our economic activity. So the youth began to question what was happening during this period. We were using bicycles. So in transportation, if we are to retain the model of core-intensive projects, it is unlikely for us to retain that. So the youth is really eager to see how we can bounce back and be able to retain a healthy environment. They're looking for leaders who are able to prioritize green and inclusive investments. And some are also curious on the contradictions of our goals, especially in relation to sustainable development goals. Goal 8 aims to increase economic growth by 3% annually. However, reports from University of London's Anthropology Department found that it is empirically infeasible for us to achieve this within the carbon budget. So, maybe it's time for us to learn about regenerative economics, which is building an economy within the planetary boundaries. And to add to that, this pandemic yung paglabas po is one of our ways to cope mentally, no? So if we leave everything to, let's say, private sector development, how we build our cities, those who have cars and capacity to pay for entrance fees, etc., they will be the only ones who can have a life outside their home. So that is an important consideration. The youth thinks that we need more green and open spaces. And this is also supported by an ecological study in Japan that the frequency of green space use was associated with increased levels of life satisfaction and decreased levels of depression. So as we continue to revise our PDP, let's keep in mind that urban nature has a great potential to be used as a nature-based solution for improved public health. And lastly, on the issue of health, we also learned that it is not just about physical wellness. A lot of youth experience distress, anxiety, and depression. And while it is laudable that the DOH is extending psychological and psychiatric limited consultations, hindi pa rin po siya enough. So in line with the objective of economic growth is productivity, correct? So therefore, maybe if we expand investments or our health insurance to cover mental health, we will have more productive and motivated citizens. Another political reality in order for us to achieve this, yung long and healthy life sa AmBisyon Natin, is we need to overcome institutional level obstacles. We need to find the leakages of government finance. And nahanap na po yung iba. Nahanap na po natin. And we want to rely on our justice systems to correct this and bring back the equilibrium. So again, as mentioned by Yusek, it is all interconnected. The youth deems that if we have strong institutions, we will have resources to pave the way for a matatag, maginhawa, and panatag na buhay. And to answer naman po, do you want me to continue po yung life during the pandemic?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
sige. So, gamitin ko po yung linya ng mga ekonomista na it depends po talaga. So, how the pandemic affected our lives depends on the economic position of the youth to replicate a place that is conducive for work or study. So what we found out with our consultation, on two aspects po, no, time savings and cost savings. So dun sa mga privilege po, and ayun, I recognize I'm one of this, no? I have internet connection, I'm able to participate in webinars. This time, yung mga may income and job securities, this was a chance to explore other passions, hobbies that they were not able to pursue because of the time spent in commute or other obligations sa bahay, etc. So for example, some of the youth are able to join volunteer groups. I was able to start a concepto in 2020, and some are taking second jobs or exploring freelancing activities. But there is a different narrative po for the youth in the lower income status. So for the employed youth in industries like tourism, services, and creative economy like theater, marami po ang na-displace, and those who are able to bounce back are those with the necessary transferable skills. Ayun na nga po yung digital divide. So those with skills like data analysis, data entry, allow them to apply for other, what we can call pandemic-proof jobs like call center and virtual assistantships. So ngayon po kasi, when you are applying for a job, usually priority is those with laptops, certain RAM or certain threshold of internet connection na ipapa-screenshot pa po yung internet speed nyo actually habang nag-a-apply po kayo ng trabaho. Kasama na po siya. So nakikita po natin na it's already an unfair playing field for the others. And we're also able to consult students. So for both students and working youth, nahirapan din po sila because face-to-face classes, there is more opportunities for them to clarify, and there are also spaces for additional instruction that are not available during asynchronous classes. And they also mentioned that yung meron kang kasama na mag-aral, that's also important to them, their motivation. And then moving on to cost savings po. Our observation is nung start, okay po na work from home or study from home because we have transportation savings. However, there is also a trade-off. There is rise in utilities expenses and communications. So we had to load our mobile data, we have to top up and set up Wi-Fi, no? And yung rice po dito, it does not compensate dun sa natipid mo actually dun sa transportation costs. And to add to that, illustrate na lang po natin, for example, you are an employed youth renting an apartment in Manila kasi taga Rizal ka or Bulacan, for example. You stay 24/7 in your house. So yung electricity and water bills mo for most of the day were previously, charge sa employer, but now you are burdened with that as well. So marami na po yung nabawas sa ating disposable income. So yun lang po. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tisha. Okay, so we've heard from our youth sector. Maraming salamat. It was a very informative discussion there. We also have our colleague from the NEDA Development Information Staff. She's a working mom with school-age kids, just like me. And during the pandemic, her family moved from Quezon City to Pampanga. So apart from how she copes, it would be interesting to get her thoughts and plans in the coming months as we return to physical reporting. So please welcome Ms. Maria Charina Kiwa. Cha?
Hello.
So,
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Director Neris. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, it was actually a 300 degrees turn to move out of Manila and back to the province. It was also costly to mobilize, and because everything seemed uncertain in 2020. So the challenge of transitioning to remote work where everyone in the family is at home all the time. The children are also attending school from home, so each one of us needs our own space in the house. So I have to rearrange and convert some areas to create workspaces, and then everyone needs fast internet because because we're all working from home, and then the children are irritated when there's poor connection because they cannot finish what they're doing online, especially if it's synchronous sessions. And then if you have a preschooler or elementary children with you, you also become an instant homeschool teacher. And so you juggle to balance work and parenting, because you also have house chores and you check the well-being of the family, but you also need self-care. Sometimes, in order to balance all of this, mothers end up turning down work opportunities for their own advancement and promotion because they always think of themselves as you always have to give first to your family or children. And then the increased responsibility was a struggle, and it's very challenging. But at the same time, it also opened doors for discovering new norms, new ways of doing things. And there were many experimentals, and we realized some things were possible, like working remotely. But one of the most important things that was said by Yusek Rose a while ago is the importance of savings. Yeah. And now that we're moving from pandemic to endemic mindset, it will be another 360 degrees turn for me and my family because we have to move back again to Manila. But we're still feeling some uncertainty because the children are still homeschooling. So because we have to be both working out of the house so that we move together. Okay. And it also, it's very hard, but it's also the importance of the policies, no? It's the importance of mainstreaming gender perspective in pandemic policies is very important. It creates and highlights equal opportunities for all, regardless of gender. Kasi pag walang gender biases from policies, regulations, and budgets, we all get access to government services. Okay. Then it follows na if you have access to government services, you have access to social security protection, health and wellness services, transport services, education, financial and banking services, and job security.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank you very much, Cha. So, from the macro to the very micro, so talagang real life situations natin. So, maybe at this point we can ask, would you like to add another thought, maybe in reaction, Dr. Balisacan, and also Yusek Rose and Sir Manny later.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed listening to Patricia and Cha, of course, to my colleague Manny. I learned a lot, and I think that it has enriched my perspective. Now, I think that so I guess the question is, is Ambition 2040 is still realizable? And I think the clarification made by Sec Manny, earlier, that the ambition, the long-term vision allows for flexibility such that the economy and the system, social system, responds to emerging challenges, to shocks, to like the pandemic, for example, and innovations and technology. And so the questions being asked by Patricia in particular are very relevant. No? That is the shock, is the pandemic changing the trajectory of the economy of the Philippines, as well as the other, the Asian countries. I think, as Patricia also said, it really depends. But I think, let me just put that back, that context back, no? Because I think when we were, I recall that how this whole project, Ambition 2040, started. No? I'm glad that Ray reminded me of that. Because way back in when we were new at NEDA in 2013, 2014, we saw this report published by ADB then. I think the title was Asia 2050, Realizing the Asian Century. And that was, I think, published in 2010, 2011, around that time. And so I was so excited to look at what that Asia Century was all about. And I was so sad and so shocked to find that report depicted the Philippines as one of those countries, few countries who will not be part of that century, a prospering century, because of, obviously, that report was looking at or informing that future based on the performance of our society, our economy, our institutions, over that 3 or so decades, prior to the publication of that report. And obviously, we know what happened to our economy, to our society during this period. And so we said we had to recraft a different narrative for the country, and a narrative that would have the support of everyone in our society, and that has to be evidence-based, and so on and so forth. So that's the whole exercise. And indeed, the experience over the 10 years almost the 10 years that followed, since then showed that indeed we can change the direction, the trajectory of the economy depending on how our leaders choose to make it. And of course, leaders and also us as stakeholders do with the opportunities or challenges that face us. No? And so I do think that the 2040 is still real. The ambition is still realizable. There may be some. We may have lost a few years, maybe 3-5 years in attaining those goals. We can make it shorter if we get our, if our leaders will choose the policies and strategies that are good for the country, good for our people, or responsive to the ambition of our people. And that I think I don't think that even as you start asking people now, I don't think that peg of what constitutes a secure life, a comfortable life, a strong life has changed. It's still the same. It's the means to going there that's probably would have changed a bit, like the way Patricia's anticipating. Maybe it's we have to think about how the urban cities or urban areas work. We have to think about more resiliency in our system. But actually, when we talk about secure future, we're talking about a resilient system, one that is able to stand shocks and things like the pandemic, so that the economy and society can continue to move on. So Ray, that's my question. That's my answer to the question. I think I haven't given up the ambition 2040. We may have to recraft a little bit to take into account the current challenges and recent developments. And I think perhaps my final word is we have to vote wisely to make sure that we get leaders who are reflecting this ambition, these dreams of Filipino people.
Thank you, sir. I just want to flag yung question dito for our panelists. What role will our OFWs play as we try to build back better? The discussions have mainly focused on the Pinoys here in the country, but what about them? Where are they in the development agenda? Any of you can respond to this, but maybe Sir Manny, would you like to add something to the discussion so far?
Not right now.
Okay.
I would be interested to hear Rose's response to the question on the role of OFWs.
Okay, Yusek Rose.
Sige. So the question came from you? Yeah, anyway. Actually, under the updated Philippine Development Plan, we have included a separate chapter on the overseas Filipinos. The goal really was for all Filipinos to be able to enjoy this matatag, maginhawa, panatag na buhay wherever they are. And so we have included strategies, from the time na paalis pa lang sila up to the time that they're there and then the time that they're back. But the goal really, the intent really is to make them participate in the development process. So make sure that they are involved in our governance and especially yung mga investments. No? What we hope to happen is that bawat lalabas na Pilipino, before they go out, they will be, kasi they have to undergo a seminar di ba? So the seminar has to do with economic and financial literacy, and what we intend to include there is yung magplano kagad sila, when are you coming back? Yan. So, what is your objective for going out, for working abroad? Is it to build a house? Ano yun? So magkano ang kailangan mo, and how much will you be parang savings na ita-target mo per year, and then when will you come back? And then actually during the past 3 years, during the past 3 years, we have managed to include also certain amendments, certain reforms that will enable many of our overseas Filipinos to participate in our development. So we have the revised corporation code, for instance, which enable yung mga single person corporation, but more importantly, it will now allow yung mga overseas placement of investments. So, and then we also have, of course, yung mga digital payments natin. And then marami pa kaming gustong ipasok pa nga eh. But really the intent is to get them to be involved here. Kasi the more that they have something at stake dito sa atin, then we think the more motivated they will be to come back, and even practice their whatever it is that they learned abroad, that they be able to practice it here. Kaya we also advocated for the extension of the Balik Scientist Law. And we have also included in our FINL, again, mga instruments that are within NEDA, we have allowed the teaching, yung pag-teach in the higher education institutions, basta hindi kailangan ng board exam, yan yung mga ganyan. So they can be allowed to come here. And then we have also yun yung mga yun ang mga niligay namin actually in the development plan. We have so kumbaga we have some of these are already there, like ownership of land. Pwede rin kahit na nagpa-naturalize ka na, naturalized citizen ka abroad, kung nari babalik ka, you want to own land, for as long as you were born here, then pwede. Yun. So, we have actually, we have enumerated all these investment opportunities for overseas Filipinos, because again, the intent is for them to be able to participate dito sa atin, sa development of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek Rose. I remember in the survey that was done for the long-term visioning exercise, with a question on migration and fact, and but surprisingly, there were still a substantive proportion who expressed a preference to work overseas, even if there were opportunities already here, that were equivalent to what they would experience overseas. So it doesn't look like this is something that's going to go away. I think that's what we learned there, and why we also, I think, emphasized in the PDP the importance of providing protection to our overseas workers. At the same time, Sir RC, you mentioned, or you referred to the issue of providing incentives to our health professionals, because one of the more regular migrants that we have, a sizable portion of the health professionals in certain countries are actually from the Philippines. So there's this tension between, wanting to keep them here, of course, for our own health objectives, particularly during the pandemic, but their own interest of finding say greener pastures. So how do you balance that? Is there really, would incentives be enough to keep them here?
Well, not quite, because I think the decision to migrate, especially for permanent migration, is much more than just incentives. There are many other factors, like the education of their children, the stability and security of life after retirement, things like that. Especially in I think, for example, many of my relatives would prefer to go to countries where there is a strong social welfare program. So obviously, that access to health, to
environment,
yeah. Especially if you go, for example, to Canada, it's one of a favorite destination now, Filipinos, because there, it access to education, to health, to social services is almost guaranteed. And so that's the kind of things that we need to improve, not to equal it to to developed countries, because we are not there, but to improve this incrementally. Now, if you look at the experiences of our neighbors, for example, you go back 2 decades ago, if you look at or even 3 at Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam in particular. I remember in early in 1990s, the 1990s and 2000, whenever we would have the opportunity to go to Vietnam. No, there were very few investors then. Vietnamese investors, but you go to Vietnam now, you see many of these small entrepreneurs in restaurants in Hanoi, in Ho Chi Minh. They came back. They were entrepreneurs that came back from places like New York or in many other cities in the world, because they would see opportunities in those countries. And I think that's what will happen to, I would think, in the Philippines, if we are able to establish long-term growth that they see as sustainable and things going on, and that will change the dynamics and the calculus of that decision to migrate or not to migrate, or to stay here for employment, or go outside. I think the basic issue is really the lack of inadequacy of opportunities, employment opportunities that has quality, not the kind of employment opportunities that you find when there's a crisis, then there are opportunities in the informal sector. But these are not the kind of thing that give you security, or that allows you to have a better quality of life. So that's it. I am not, as I see these more prosperous countries, especially countries that have, sustained rapid growth for 2 decades, 3 decades, you will see reverse migration. The best example is Ireland. They were like the Philippines before, almost the Irish go out of the country. But when the country started to boom and they sustained that for a couple of decades, then Irish would want to go back, and they made up the bulk of the entrepreneurs. So I think that will happen. We just have to improve our governance, the support systems, the social services, so that there's that option.
Thank you, Sir Arsia. I know, Sir Manny, if you'd like to pitch in on this.
I'd just like to, with respect to the role of the additional development role of OFWs, while they are overseas, of course, they can be and this was discussed in a previous PDP, that they can in fact contribute by being a market for the services that the country exports. For example, the export of services comes in several modes, right? And some of those are can take the form of the online, what do you call this? The telenovelas, for example. Those are that's an example of an export of service, and certainly the OFWs constitute a sizable market abroad. That's just one example, but I think we can think of some more.
If I may add, I think the issue really here is the concern for that migration is the human capital that you lose. It's a brain, the usual brain, and if you look at the quality of human capital that goes out, those are the high quality human capital.
That's
Yeah, and that's how it affects the economy when you are losing these highly productive workers, and of course there are also externalities created when these workers are here, and that's what creates all these multiplier effects. That's why improving the environment for our workers to stay at the OP here has to be a part of the whole architecture, but nothing is short of that. What is in the long haul is required is really getting the opportunities that expanding those potential opportunities in the country by way of putting up the infrastructure, institutional machinery, that allows people to work productively and with security in this country.
Thank you, sir. Balikan lang natin yung ating dalawang youth and mama, no? So, Tisha, would you like to react to the presentation so far? And the proposed strategies and solutions. And later si Chandler. Yeah.
Maybe not so much on the OFW, but I believe that even though they're not here, we can still tap the power of the diaspora, especially they still have families here in the Philippines, some of them, and we've noticed na they can still mobilize even if they are not here. For example, the donations of Johnson & Johnson, I think, from a Filipina nurse in the United States. No, so there's still empathy. So we can tap that. And regarding maybe moving forward on the path to new normal, I would just add that besides financial security, one of the pressing issues for the youth is also environmental security. There is this phenomenon actually of eco-anxiety where the youth is hesitant to think about the future. Ganon. So even planning for kids, maybe you can hear some of yung mga kabataan na wala talaga yun sa plano nila, things like that. And it's because they see the future as not a sustainable one. Sorry. So we need to change that, give them hope that we are planning for a greener Philippines naman. Yan po. Thank you.
Thank you, Tisha. So balikan lang natin si Cha. So we have the theme, ambition in the new normal, ano? So how would you, if you were to do you see a need to redefine the future you want? Kasi sabi mo nga kanina, no, maraming instant adjustments. How do you foresee your future in the family? So ano yung and what do you think of the proposed solutions and strategies that have been discussed so far, Cha?
First, no, we are still very fortunate that we have a government working towards the realization of AmBisyon Natin 2040. where all sectors of the society are pushed to direct their efforts towards creating opportunities for all Filipinos. Yun nga, to enjoy matatag, maginhawa, and panatag na buhay. What Sir RC said a while ago, yung social services, yung patatagin healthcare system, kasi yan nga, he's correct na people are moving to other countries for security, in terms of social services and healthcare services for retirement. People are moving to, nag-open yung Canada, yan. Pero sa atin, sa Philippines, once mapapatatagin lang natin itong mga ito, I think we can magbabago pa yung isip ng mga Pilipino na magstay pagkatiwalaan yung gobyerno, because also pala yung future ng office work, katulad ng nabanggit din ni Sir Manny kanina, ano ba yung future ng office work? Will it be still work from home arrangements, blended, yung ganito? So, kailangan siguro ma-establish rin kaagad ng gobyerno yung mga policies dito. Pero katulad nga ng sabi ko, fortunate rin tayo na we have a government na working towards the realization of AmBisyon Natin 2040.
Thank you, Cha. Maybe just one last, before we wrap up, I think we've been asked to already wrap up. Just to pick up on what Tisha said, no, we're planning for a greener Philippines. This one aspect of the ambition, when we've been presenting, of course, since when we launched it in 2016. And one of the recurring questions or issues that were being raised was that the issue of environmental sustainability or sustainability in general didn't seem to be as prominent in the vision. No? And well, we of course explained that this came out from, it was wholly based on the consultations that were done, the focus group discussions, the surveys, and it's just a reflection basically of that it wasn't very prominent in those processes. I just wanted to ask if you, given the pandemic, if we would do these consultations again today, whether you think there's going to be a substantial shift in the prominence of these issues and what we should be doing about. I know, Sir RC, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think you're right, Ray. When we started the discussions or the framing the AmBisyon Natin 2014, 2015, the issue of climate change, although it was already there, no, but we never, at least myself, I did not anticipate that. The outpouring of information, the massive information that would come out later on, and how this climate change was rapidly unfolding. That was not that much appreciated at the time, to admit. No? There were already discussions about making our communities more resilient, because we're always subjected to typhoons of various intensities, but not the climate change issues as we now know them today. No, so I think that information and this body of knowledge now about the climate change should should now help or better inform the ambition, whether it's 2040 or 2050 or 2045. But again, as I look at the metrics and the matatag, maginhawa, at panatag, it doesn't look like those are going to be to be affected much. I mean, people will still look for secure job, secure life, comfortable life. It's just a matter of course, you have to add that additional layer of comfortable or insecure means, you have less of this risk coming from climate change, but you would have, I think, from a policy perspective, you now have to be more concrete and more specific with respect to how we address those issues at the community level, at the regional level, at the national level. So that's, I think, how I would like to take the Ambition 2040 moving forward.
If I may, I would say health and the other aspects of social protection will most likely become more important as we move. The experience with COVID, with the pandemic, certainly puts that concern front and center.
Thank you, Sir Manny. I think Tisha wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, I just want to add that moving forward, the youth views this time as a critical junction in our nation's history, and they're hopeful really that we can take advantage of these lessons. So for example, the youth wants to retain the unexpected good things that came from the pandemic. So for example, the rise of online banking, learning about savings and investments because of the time that we are home, and exploring other jobs and digital skills. Another notable initiative by the government is Project Sparta, where they trained around 30,000 plus in data science. So that is a laudable initiative. So on my personal experience, for example, in work, we can do away pala po with papers in memoranda. We can work in Google Docs. Aminin po natin. So these things we can shift pala. We hope we can retain these things and leave the ones that got us in this mess in the first place. Ayun po. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tisha. Relate much. So we only have a few minutes left. Siguro, let me ask Music Rose for the final words before we close the session.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. This has been a very, very productive session. I'm sure hindi lang ako, no, but every one of us really learned a lot. In fact, pwede na akong magsulat ng chapter 1 of the SCR and the PDP, the next PDP. Now, actually, speaking of, right now we're doing the Socioeconomic Report 2021. And a new thing that we are introducing here is really the use of a persona empathy map. So, bigla ko naisip, kailangan pala sinama namin si Tricia sa sa aming persona. But we will do this again for the next PDP. So, this one actually, the persona empathy map forces us to think about the man on the street, the Filipina, the mother at home, the working mom at home, and so many forces us to think about yung mga disadvantage, and then what are their goals, their frustrations, their current situation, and how do we help them going forward. So just to hopefully provide some hope as to how we are thinking about this economic recovery. We are thinking of essentially 3 buckets of strategies here. So the first one has to do with enhancing the PDITRV strategies, the prevent, detect, isolate, treat, reintegrate, and then the vaccinate strategies. So of course, we're ramping up on the vaccination. We just got a report just now, mainit-init pa to, that for today we have reached, yesterday pala, we have reached 1.239 million jobs yesterday. So our target is 1 million jobs a day. And then towards the end of November, magkakaroon ng vaccination day, 3 days, where over those 3 days, we'll get 15 million people vaccinated. So mga ganito. So we are really ramping up, and really the pressure is, we realize that we really need to safely reopen the economy. So that's the first bucket, to enhance this PDITRV. The second bucket is really to prevent the scarring. So it's really about coming up with catch-up plans, which we hope will start next year. Will probably take until 2023, yung catch-up plans to address yung learning deficiencies, yung mga financial encumbrances of especially the MSMEs, and then the supply chain gaps. So we will need to address this, so that we prevent the especially the economic scarring, and of course yung socio-economic scarring, of course. And the third one is really on building resiliency. And so I'm happy to report to Patricia that in terms of the main strategies under building resiliency, we're talking about innovation, smart infrastructure, regional equity, and then climate action. So kasama siya sa magiging talagang, we will put a strong emphasis on that, kasi like you said, nakita natin kung paano like this COVID is actually a zoonotic disease. So masyadong parang nagkakapareho na tayo ng muka, no, sa mga sa mga animals, yung mga sakit nila napupunta na sa atin. So that's really something that I think with proper strategies regarding climate action, I hope that we can work on this really effectively. And thank you also to, I heard from Chair RC na he's not yet giving up on the AmBisyon. Yay! So it's really about accelerating double time. Magdo-double time tayo, both in terms of working together and in terms of the sense of urgency to getting this done. And yung sabi kanina ni Sec Manny that we might have to do another survey. Actually, we were planning to do one last year in 2020, but because of the pandemic, we had to cancel it. And in any case, we also needed to reallocate money for the pandemic, so dun siya dinala. And then for this year, we also canceled that plan. But by next year, yes, we will. Well, again, God willing, God willing, magagawa na natin yung survey na yon. And yeah, we are ready to if there has to be a redefinition of this AmBisyon. But for now, we think that stays. With respect to the other issues, so like on sustainable development, that will be part of the strategies. So you can rest assured that even though kakaunti lang ang nagsabi nito as their priority with respect to government and certainly NEDA, this is actually a top priority. And that's all from me. Nerys,
Thank you, Sec Rose, and thank you, Dr. RC Balisacan, Dr. Manny Esguerra, Patricia, and Sharina, and of course, Director Ray, who's my co-host. So before we say goodbye for now, I'd like to invite everyone to please turn on your camera for a quick photo opportunity. In the meantime, please keep smiling while I make some announcements. So we share the link to the evaluation form on screen and on the chat box. Just copy the link and paste it on your browser. Please note that the URL is case sensitive. And lastly, the Philippine Economic Society would like to remind all PES members to stay in the webinar room for the general membership meeting right after this session. The closing plenary session of the 59th PES annual meeting and conference will follow right after. So on behalf of the National Economic and Development Authority, we would like to thank you all for all our attendees and our viewers for joining us today. So isang matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. Thank you.
Recording stopped.